For today's video, I'll be sharing with you 10 functional and beautiful knitting patterns to help you use up those odd skeins of fingering weight yarn you know you have laying around in your stash. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Midweek Ramble. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. Today's video was brought to you by a lovely viewer who submitted the idea for the video in the Wool Needles Hands tip line. You can do so yourself by heading over to woolneedleshands.com/tipline and leave a suggestion for upcoming video topics there. Thank you so much to the viewer who suggested that we do a video about one skein pattern ideas. And today we're focusing on one skein pattern ideas in fingering weight yarn. I'm also going to take this opportunity as we talk about single skein projects to share with you my project bag that I am using for a single skein project right now, which happens to be a pair of socks. And this is a project bag by the MagnerCo. This is their mini version of their regular size project bag. They also have a maxi version. Casey from MagnerCo, which is based out of Athens, Georgia, was kind enough and generous enough to send me one of his bags in this size to try, and I have been using it for the last 3 days and I love it. It is the perfect size for a one skein project, like a pair of socks, a small shawl, or any of the projects that I share here with you today. So this is the Mini Magner by MagnerCo. They are an Etsy-based business, and I will link to this bag down below in the description box, as well as my pinned comment in the comment section of the video, along with everything that I mention here. All of that will be linked in those two locations. I also want to mention before we dive in that the patterns I mention here have been added to a bundle in my favorites over on Ravelry. I will link to that Ravelry bundle down below in the description box, as well as in the comment section of the video. As I usually do with videos like this, I will be doing a screen grab of my phone so that you can see what I'm looking at as I describe each of the patterns that I share with you here. I am using the Ravelry app to connect to my Ravelry content, and you can find that app over on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. It's available for both Android and iOS. It's a fantastic app to use if you want to be able to connect to your Ravelry content from your mobile device. Okay, we're starting off the list today with something that is absolutely functional, but also really nice to have. I really like to have hand knit coasters available in areas of the home where people sit and gather with beverages. I think that offering people a coaster is just a really great thing to do. It makes them feel comfortable about putting their drink down on your table. It also protects your furniture, and if they're hand knit, it's just a little added piece of you in your home decor. I actually keep a little handmade coaster over here on my table. This is of course a crocheted granny square, so it's a little bit different than something that you would use a single skein of yarn for, as it's multiple colors, but you get where I'm coming from. I particularly love the pattern, the Hibiscus Coasters by Sweater Babe. It's a really simple but beautiful coaster design that you can knit using a single skein of yarn. There are examples with tonal yarn as well as examples with more speckly variegated yarns. So really either type of yarn would be perfect for this particular design. It's a great way to use up those sock yarns that you have in your stash and you know you're just not going to get to for socks. Each coaster requires only 13 yards of yarn. So if you really wanted to use up an entire skein of yarn, you could create 6 sets of 5 coasters each and start saving them for gifts around the holidays. Simple neck scarves are all the rage right now, and I wanted to find one that could be an all-season accessory that could be worn even in the warmer months of the year. And the one that I found here is called the Augusta Lace Scarf. This is a design by Bella Helms, and it features a really lovely delicate lace pattern that's not too feminine and frilly. It just provides a really nice way for air to circulate through the scarf. The scarf is not super long, so it sits at your neck, ties around once, and it's a really nice accent to whatever you happen to be wearing, but it's also perfectly functional. Depending on whatever kind of fiber content you're using to knit this, it could be really warm, or if you're using a superwash merino or just a merino wool, or even a cellulose-based plant fiber, it could be nice and cooling as well if you wanted to wear it in late spring, even into the summer. This particular scarf only requires 241 yards of fingering weight yarn. That's 220 meters. And it's just a really nice lightweight accessory that I would be interested in knitting as something I would wear in the late spring and even into the summer as a neckerchief for protecting my neck from the sun. And a bonus, it looks like right now, if you're watching this when the video goes live or thereabouts, there is a 25% discount in Ravelry if you use the code 25 at checkout. This next design is for a pair of mittens that are beautifully cabled at the top of the hand. I love these because they are not too dense and too heavy, and it looks like the fabric of these mittens makes them very, very wearable for much longer throughout the year. This is the Old Town's Story Mittens by Natalie Pellick, and they're gorgeous. I love the way they look in this really lovely neutral gray color, but I can absolutely see these knit up in a really beautiful tonal fingering weight yarn, even getting those speckly yarns involved if you really just want the texture more than anything to stand out. Knitting this particular pattern in a really heavily variegated speckly yarn is not going to be the greatest if you really want that cable texture to stand out and you want to see the cable design, because the busyness of the fabric will hide that a little bit. However, if you're really just going for something nice and textured, you can knit this in whatever yarn you decide. I personally think the best bang for your buck is to find a really nice tonal or solid skein that you have lying around in your stash for something like this, so those beautiful cables really shine through. This design only uses up to 315 yards of yarn, and it's available in 3 different sizes. Lately, I've gotten really into that kind of cone top beanie hat design. I used to not be into this. I kind of thought that it just looked really unflattering, but because I've been wearing my hats a little bit differently lately, now that I'm growing my hair out and I actually have hair coming out of the bottom of my hat, I tend to wear them a little bit higher up on my head where I have a little bit more of that cone kind of top going on up there. And I really kind of dig that look. So I've been gravitating towards beanies that have that look and that style. And I know it's not for everybody, but I wanted to share this particular one here because I really, really like this hat and I see myself knitting this in the near future. This is called the Callio hat by Tori Yu. Now, one of the reasons I really love this is because it only requires a single skein of fingering weight yarn. You can knit this entire hat with 350 yards or less of fingering weight yarn. But the reason I love that so much is because when you look at the design of the hat, it's a really nice, stretchy, all over rib, and it has a double brim and a high crown. So that's a really generous amount of hat that you're getting with less than a single skein of yarn, and I think that's fantastic. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck here. What's really good about this as well is that it's a pretty basic all over pattern. It's a great place to play with those really funky and colorful skeins of sock yarn that you have in your stash. Now, I know we don't always have opportunities to knit for babies, but babies are a really great reason to knit small items that only require a single skein of yarn. And this next particular pattern I am absolutely obsessed with. If you've been watching the podcast, you know that I have a dear friend who is expecting a baby in April, a baby girl, and I have been just really into baby knits because of that. So when they pop up in my feed, I kind of get excited about the prospect of knitting baby things again. It's been a while since I've knit anything for babies, and so I kind of love having the excuse to do that. And this particular design, called the Pickles Romper by Marta Porcel, is a beautiful option. Now, this is a really neutral, both gender and kind of color design. And of course, you can change the color however you want, but it's just a really nice neutral design. And I also think that depending on what you wear under or what you put on the baby to wear under this, it could be worn all throughout the year. It's a really simple romper design, very, very just cozy looking. You could knit this in whatever fiber content you want, depending on what time of the year the baby will be wearing this. This particular sample is knit in cotton, which is a really safe bet for babies. But if you know that there's no wool allergy or anything like that, you could knit this in a nice merino, a cashmere, an alpaca if you want a little bit extra drape on the baby, or if you want it to fit a little bit longer. Anything would be fantastic for this design. I think it is absolutely adorable. And it only uses anywhere from 284 to 350 yards of yarn. So you could pop one of these out in less than a skein of yarn and probably in no time and have a really adorable gift for a new baby on the way. It looks like it's also available from 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, and 6 to 9 months. So you have kind of a range of sizes. And no matter what size you choose out of that entire range, you're still only looking at a single skein of yarn. Ever since I whipped up that cowl on my Centro knitting machine and have been wearing it all the time to take Pepper for walks or to be outside when it's chilly, I have been kind of going down that cowl rabbit hole. cowl. I find that I notice them on Ravelry more. I'm more interested in wearing them. And I'm also really interested in finding nice ones in a lightweight fabric, something that's not super dense like the one that I made on the Centro, but something that can be worn more often throughout the year. Enter the Soft as a Cloud Cowl by Pearl Soho. This is a gorgeous cowl. It fits the bill for all of the different reasons I just mentioned, and it's a bonus because it's free. This is knit using their Signet base, which is, I believe, an alpaca. Yeah, it's 30% alpaca, 70% cashmere, so it's super luxe, but you could knit this in any fingering weight yarn, and it only requires 328 yards. I also really love this because the overall design is very neutral. You have this really beautiful mock cable situation going on here, and the overall shape is just really flattering on anyone who wears it. It sits around the neck with some space. It lays on the shoulders nicely without being too bunchy. It's just a really great overall piece, and it almost looks like it could be kind of worn in a reversible way to give it more of a ribbed look, but it's just a really nice staple cowl to have in your collection. And yeah, a bonus that it's free. So that is the Soft as a Cloud Cowl by Pearl Soho. Bear this in mind if you are purchasing the yarn for this pattern and you are not stash diving for the sake of using a single skein of yarn. If you're using the Signet yarn, you are going to have to purchase 2 skeins of yarn because each skein of that yarn comes with 164 yards, which is less than a traditional 100-gram skein of fingering weight yarn. But overall, this design only requires 328 yards of fingering weight yarn. Several years ago, when my husband was first getting started teaching, I knit him a necktie, and he wore it a lot when I made it for him. However, he's been teaching for quite a while now. He has been a baseball coach at the high school where he teaches, and so he kind of has been grandfathered into the athletic wear / professional attire for work. So he gets to wear a lot of his high school's athletic wear to school and have that count as his professional attire, if that makes any sense. He teaches high school social studies, so it's just more of a relaxed department. I don't know, take that for what it is, but he does look really handsome and professional when he goes to school, but he no longer wears a necktie. But way back when a necktie was a little bit more appropriate, I got a kick out of knitting him a necktie and having him wear it to school as a little handmade item from me. And I think that a necktie, whether it's something that you have use for or somebody that you're close to has use for or not, it's kind of nice to have a good necktie pattern ready to go if the need ever arises. And this particular one I'm sharing with you here, this is called the Newfield Tie by Nadine Dramsfield. This is a really great pattern for a necktie. I love this because it's a double thick necktie. That means that it's going to lay down nice against the chest. It's not going to flop all over the place because it's lightweight. It's nice and thick. It gives it some good structure. And I do like that little diamond or triangular end at the end of the tie, like an actual tie. I think that looks nice as opposed to a squared off end that you sometimes see in hand knit ties. I love the idea of knitting this in something really neutral, but I do think that this is a great opportunity to play with color, those speckly yarns, variegated yarns, because a necktie is a great place to add a pop of color and make a statement. I do see, though, that in the photo of the gentleman here, who looks very nice in this tie, he's wearing something a little bit more on the casual side with that bomber style jacket that he has on. I do see that that necktie is too short. So I know that a necktie, if you're wearing it right, it needs to go down and hit right above the button on your pants. That's the length of a necktie. That's where it needs to hit if you're wearing it properly, sartorially speaking. This one is a little short, so it causes me to wonder if you need to actually knit the necktie a little bit longer than what's prescribed here in the pattern. Of course, it all matters on how long the torso is of the person that you're knitting this for, so all of that is just relative. But it does require 459 yards on the largest side of the necktie. So that leads me to believe that if you do need to knit it even larger than the largest size, you may need to dip into a second skein. So bear that in mind. But overall and generally speaking, you should be able to knit this really lovely necktie with just a single skein of fingering weight yarn. This next design is a headband, and I really love this particular headband, but I feel like headbands in general are a really great place to look if you're trying to find a way to use those odd skeins of fingering weight yarn that you have in your stash. Now, this particular headband, called the Aurora Headband by Megan Nodecker, is one of my favorites. This is a really great ultra wide headband with that really cool twist in the front that you can either wear off to the side, wear right in the front. It kind of has that turban look, but it's a headband. I love it. There are instructions in this pattern for 5 weights of yarn ranging from fingering to Aran, so you really aren't restricted to the weight of yarn that you're using to knit this design. But because we're looking at fingering weight yarn, you can absolutely knit one of these headbands with a single ball or a single skein of fingering weight yarn. And if you are using a fingering weight yarn, a little bonus is you can actually get 2 headbands out of one 400 yard skein of yarn. Now, I didn't want to front load this video with a sock pattern because I really want to communicate here that it's not just socks that you can knit with single skeins of fingering weight yarn. The world is your oyster and you have lots of options like I've shared with you here. But I do want to include at least one pattern for socks, and that is a pattern that I just recently completed, albeit a modified version of this pattern, but it is a pattern that I really enjoyed knitting and reading from and learning from, and that is the One Sock by Kate Atherley in collaboration with the Fiber Company. This particular pattern by Kate Atherley is a great jumping off point for coming up with your own personal vanilla sock recipe if you have yet to do that. A vanilla sock is just a sock that doesn't have any fancy stitch pattern. It's just a sock with a stockinette leg, a stockinette foot with a ribbed cuff, heels, and toes. Nothing fancy, and typically it's a recipe that a person uses that's kind of their custom sock recipe. So if you do have lots of odd fingering weight skeins of yarn in your stash that you think would be great for knitting socks, meaning that they're superwash potentially, or that they include nylon, then this is a great place to go. It gives you a nice blank canvas for playing with color with those variegated skeins of yarn, and it holds your hand throughout the process so you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. Kate Atherley is kind of, in my opinion, like the sock knitting guru, so anything by her as it relates to socks is going to be good. Now, last but not least, and this is one that I've been eyeballing for a while for myself, is by the illustrious Joji Locatelli, and it is called the Lone Skein Shawl. Now, I'm not really into shawls, generally speaking, personally. I love the way they look. I just don't find that I have lots of opportunities to wear them. Hand knit sweaters serve me really well in the wintertime. Anything on top of that typically is too much. However, this particular design here is really great for warmer months out of the year, and I feel like you could even get away with wearing something like this here where I live in Southern Nevada in the summertime, because it's a great opportunity for keeping the sun off your neck, keeping the hot rays of the sun off of your back and your shoulders, and ultimately just protecting you from the intense heat. And if you're knitting this in a superwash merino, or if you choose to use a cellulose plant-based fiber, you're going to create a fabric that's really great at wicking moisture away from the skin and actually works to cool your body, which is another reason why I think that the style of this and the aesthetic of this fits with the warmer months in a desert region and a desert climate like where I live. The One Skein shawl clocks in at 440 yards of fingering weight yarn, or 402 meters, and that is just about an entire skein of light fingering or fingering weight yarn, generally speaking. A lot of skeins of yarn tend to have 400 yards. This is more than 400 yards, but you most likely do have those odd skeins of fingering weight yarn in your stash that top out at anywhere from 447 to 463 yards of yarn. Those would be perfect for this particular shawl. And I also do think that based on what I've heard about this shawl, it's really easy to modify it if you just don't have that much yarn and you need to make it a little bit smaller. It's important to remember that not all knitters are knitting items that require multiple skeins. There are some knitters out there, believe it or not, who have no interest in knitting shawls that require 3 skeins of yarn or sweaters that require 4 skeins of yarn. They just want to knit something beautiful, functional, with minimum investment but maximum impact. And I think that that is great. So if that is you, or if you just happen to be a knitter with a lot of oddball skeins of fingering weight yarn in your stash, I hope you were able to take away something from this video. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me ramble today. If you took value from this video or enjoyed yourself at any point, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, definitely subscribe, and click the bell icon so you can be notified anytime I upload new content here on the channel, which is every Wednesday and every Sunday. And if you would like to show some additional support for the Wool Needles Hands channel and the work that I'm doing here, don't forget to check out the merch shop. You can find the Wool Needles Hands merch listed below the video here. You can find such things as the So Lovely sweatshirt, or even a Wool Needles Hands logo coffee mug like the one I'm using today, plus lots of other really fun conversation starters to show support for your favorite podcast. Also, don't forget to check out woolneedleshands.com if you'd like to drop me a tip over in the tip line for suggestions on future and upcoming videos, and also to sign up for the Wool Needles Hands monthly newsletter. Until we meet again for Sunday's today's episode of the podcast. Happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.